Welcome to the Dr. Laurie Marbas podcast, where she interviews experts in health and science, sharing their expertise so you can live your healthiest life.
This episode of the podcast is proudly sponsored by Fit Vegan Coaching, the world's leading whole food, plant-based body recomposition program for Gen X and baby boomers. Founded by Maxime, whose personal journey began after losing his ex-fiancée to breast cancer, Fit Vegan Coaching is on a mission to disease-proof the world through the transformative power of plant-based eating and fitness. This program is the Rolls-Royce of plant-based coaching, offering all-inclusive services, personalized plans, world-class accountability, lifelong support, and more. Say goodbye to the yo-yo dieting and embrace a lasting transformation that will rev up your metabolism even post-transformation. Ready to take charge of your health and vitality? Head over to fitvegan.ca, that's fitvegan.ca, and mention Dr. Laurie for exclusive bonus savings when you sign up. Don't miss this opportunity to join the movement towards a healthier, fitter, and more vibrant you. This episode of the podcast is proudly sponsored by The Healing Kitchen, your path to vibrant health. Immerse yourself in the transformative program, guided by the combined expertise of myself, Dr. Laurie Marbas, and Chef Brittany Giroudi, who has lost 70 pounds on a whole food plant-based diet. Here's what's in store for you. Virtual weekly sessions. Engage in an immersive 60-minute virtual session every single week, where you'll delve into the world of wholesome plant-based goodness right from your own kitchen. Cooking with Brittany the first half hour. Unleash your inner chef as you're captivated by Chef Brittany Giroudi's culinary mastery that will delight your taste buds and nourish your body. Medical Q&A with Dr. Laurie the last half hour. Prioritize your well-being during the second half hour. I will personally address your medical inquiries, providing evidence-based insights and personalized advice, empowering you to make informed choices for your health. So join us on the Healing Kitchen to help you step into a healthier and most vibrant future. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Dr. Laurie Marbas, and first of all, I just want to say thank you for being here, and I really want to have a big thank you for Kris Carr for joining us today. How are you two? How are you doing today?
So good. I'm so happy to be with you, Laurie.
Well, I will tell you, I've been a fan for a long time, and then I saw that you had the new book. It's I'm Not a Mourning Person. And to be honest, I started reading it, but I was like, man, I really would be curious to see if she read the book on Audible. So I read the book on Audible, and I thought that was so moving, and you did such a phenomenal job. So thank you for doing your own voice, because I think you are very powerful when you speak the book, which was really moving for me. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. To be honest, I have not heard it because, like many people, I don't really like listening to myself. So I just have to say thank you for sharing that. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, your the emotions, the inflections, and your sense of humor really shine through. I'm assuming your sense of humor. So that was just really delightful, because I think the words are fabulous, but hearing you speak, it was really, really, really such a gift for me. So um I just will start with, I mean, it's such a heavy um subject for a book. How did you even get, I would find difficulty and courage in even starting it. Like, how do you even encompass this with words? It was such a vast thing to write about.
Yeah, well, that's such a great question. For me, I actually find a lot of joy and healing and creativity in writing about difficult things. Right? They're hard to write about difficult things in a way that is something that people want to read and actually are drawn to read and can get value out of. And so I like that challenge. And I've written 7 books, and they tend to be on, challenging topics like cancer and vegetables. Not everybody wants to read about vegetables. You know what I mean? That's scary to some people. And now grief. And but what I have found is the places that scare us, the places that we resist the most, that's where opportunity for evolution and expansion lies.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like where like big living happens.
Mm.
And because we're afraid of some of these topics, we shy away from them and then we miss out on these opportunities for big living.
Mm.
And sometimes it's really more so the fear of the concept, the fear of the pain, as opposed to the emotion itself or the experience itself. You know, it's like the fear of my perceived um, idea of what that's going to feel like.
Mm.
And so I just dove into it. It was time for me to write another book. And I have to write what I'm moved to explore and what's going on for me. Otherwise, it's completely out of alignment and I can't gin it up.
Mm.
So it was like, okay, this
Yeah.
is the topic. It's about grief and loss and the big, messy emotions that happen when life falls apart. And considering so many of us have gone through such a difficult time these last 5 years, when we think about just even the pandemic,
Mm.
um, I know that I'm not the only one trying to walk this journey in a way that is not only helpful but healing.
I like that, helpful and healing. So, when you say live a big life, can you expand upon that a little bit? Because I think some people don't understand that they can live a bigger life now because they feel so weighted down by our thoughts and our
Yeah.
perceptions and our beliefs that aren't necessarily the truth. And it's really hard for people to peel back enough layers to find that there is space to live a big life. Can you share what that means for you? And
Yeah. Absolutely. So for me, you know, I've been living with stage 4 cancer for 21 years now, and it's that connection to my mortality. It's the reminder of my mortality that has the opportunity to put me in a shell and shut me down, or it can be a kick in the ass because life is short. No matter even if you think you're at the start of it, it goes by really quickly, you know. And for many of us, myself included, I probably have less days ahead of me than I do behind me. You know what I mean? I'm 52 years old. So when you get down to the just brass tacks and the numbers, then you can say, oh, I better get busy living, whatever that looks like for me. And what I would say is big life happens on the inside. It's not necessarily all of the external accomplishments and the cars and the houses and the, you know, whatever it is that can be fun to accumulate for some people. It happens on the inside. And to me, it happens when I am feeling more free. So free of the fear that might be holding me back, free of the pain that I might be carrying around from unfinished business, being more in flow with my energy, with my emotions, with my heart. Because I think ultimately you can have everything in the world, and when you don't have that freedom and that sort of sense of self, it's like you have nothing. So what if you start to look at your life and say, okay, what are some of the barriers? What are some of the key places where I am stuck or where I am feeling resistance? And what would it look like to actually not have resistance there? What would that feel like? How would that make me move through space and time? You know, and like, and when you're able to answer that question, then I think you start to have a path forward for your unique opportunity for healing, you know. Oh man, at the end of the day, it's this one relationship that's really weighing on me. Okay, well, what would happen if you just poured love into that space? What would happen if that one relationship you started to feel some freedom around? You started to feel some resolution around, right? We don't even have to have that with the other person. It's something that happens in ourselves. And so to me, thank you for asking. That's a very long-winded way of saying that's what a big life looks like.
mm, pouring into what you're looking for, just giving it, and it will magically appear in some unique and unexpected ways. I think grief and fear. So fear is a big one. I can't imagine what it must be like to live with an entity or a being, or however you, I don't know what you refer to it as, a cancer. I'm always very careful to tell my patients, I work with a lot of patients who are type 2 diabetes or stuff, or
Mhm.
they'll say, I'm anxious. And I'm like, instead of saying I am anxious, say there's an anxious feeling within me. Because I think the more they identify this. So can we speak to the fear and how you deal with it? Does it come up, or have you made um a, I don't know, made a relationship with it? Like, how do you dance with this constant reminder of your mortality? Because that alone can be so fear provoking for people, just the thought of death. And then
Yeah.
also other fears that provide all the anxiety, like fear of being abandoned or fear of whatever
Mhm.
it might be. Can you speak to that? Because I think that's a really powerful lesson so many people are struggling to figure out.
Yeah. You ask beautiful questions. Thank you. um, I think you said it so beautifully. It is a dance and it is a relationship. And how I like to approach it is all of my emotions are information.
Mm,
And so if I think of them like that, then it sort of diffuses their power a little bit. But then it also inspires me to get curious about them. So, for example, when I found out that I had stage 4 cancer and then I have dozens of tumors in my liver and both of my lungs, of course I was terrified. Now, many years later, I have built that relationship and it started with curiosity. Well, okay, let's talk about this from a practical standpoint. I don't really even know what my liver and lungs do. So maybe I could actually educate myself a little bit. And then through that process of getting curious and educating myself, I would then say, okay, well, what helps you? What are things that I can do that actually help these organs so I can contribute to my well-being so I don't feel like I'm just like on the sidelines waiting for a doctor to do this or a cure to, finally a breakthrough cure to happen. Like, how can I participate in this thing called my life?
mm,
And that was the path for me, continues to be the path for me from a wellness perspective. But it's the same thing with our mental health,
mm,
right? So if I can say my emotions are information, if I can get curious about them, I can learn a bit about them, then I don't vilify them or vilify myself because I feel shame, because I feel rage, because I feel all of these things that are there for a reason. It's like getting mad at your kid because they want to use all of the Crayolas in the box. It's like, no, blue only, brown bad. It's like, what are you talking about? So
oh,
it's like we got Crayolas in the box. Let's learn how to use them. Let's learn more about them. And so when it comes to fear, you know, I often will say, invite your fear to tea.
mm,
When I'm in fear or anxiety, chances are I am ruminating, I am future tripping, I am, freaking out about this, that, and the other thing that may or may not happen.
mm,
And if I can understand that and bring myself back to this moment, oftentimes I'll do it through humor because that'll crack through for me.
mm,
You know what I mean? Like that's
yeah.
my medicine. I'll make myself laugh or I'll say something absolutely ridiculous or so morbid that nobody should ever hear it, but you laugh so hard. Do you know what I mean? You're just like, that is offensive and so freaking funny. And that brings me back to the present, even just that release of laughter, of, even being able to poke fun at some of the stories that I come up with.
Mm,
Um, and another thing that can happen. So what am I doing there? I'm like stopping the pattern. I'm stopping, like I don't know if you have a dog or if you've ever had a dog.
easy. And she just had her ACL, she had a TPLO last Tuesday. So your dog story when he passed, it just we're a big dog fan. It's my fourth child. So
Oh,
she literally is just looking, and we have to have her caged and confined so she doesn't use her leg. And she just will sit there and look at me like, I'm really here. Can you come and help? Like, I'm hanging out with you most of the day. What's going on? So yes, I appreciate that.
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
so but when
Yeah.
your dog is licking a hot spot,
Mm,
and that's fear, that's anxiety,
yeah.
that's that thing. And
Mm,
sometimes what do? We throw a tennis ball, or we give them a cookie. We have to break the pattern.
mm,
The same is true for our minds. And so for me, it might be through humor, it could be through I don't like lifting weights, but I turned 52 and everybody says you're supposed to be strong now, right? And so I have this amazing video that I do, like thank goodness that we can join gyms that are online now or join fitness programs online. And it's like 10 minutes, maybe 25 minutes if I'm ambitious, and I lift my weights with David P. So I am peeling 2 carrots with one peeler, right? I don't kill birds. I'm a vegan. Um, you know that saying, two
yeah.
birds with one stone. Like, who came up with
Yeah.
that? My point
Yes.
again
Yes, I
is
love it.
that I'm disrupting the pattern.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think that these are the tools that we can start to put in our toolbox because we're going to be afraid, we're going to be anxious. Even just calling out, oh, this is what I'm feeling. This is my brain on fear. This is my brain on anxiety. These are some of the things that I can do to change the channel to come back to this present moment. And you can come
Mhm.
up with your menu. I have a lot in the book.
Mhm.
And those are two things that I'll do
Mm.
as you so beautifully said, develop this dance with these emotions.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that's really beautiful. It reminds me of, so I've always been a fan of Tony Robbins, and there was a time, I can't remember where I heard it, but he would, or maybe he told someone like he had a rubber band, or maybe he was trying to quit the habit of chewing his fingernails. I can't remember exactly, but he wore a rubber band and he'd pop it to like break whatever this pattern was or the obsessive thought. And it really was just bringing him back to the present moment, which we had spoken to a little bit earlier. So I feel like that's kind of what you're doing is like you're aware of like, that is not, it's just a thought. It's not who you are. You're not going to identify it, but you're dancing with it. So I think that's powerful. But I really wanted to highlight one of the things you mentioned was future tripping. That was so great. Some of the things that you say in the book, I like the lizards and the smell of the lizards, and I'm like cracking up. But anyway, your humor is right down my alley. I'm telling you. And your therapist, if I'm sure I would be her best friend. Like the
I
things she tells you,
probably.
I know, like amazing. Anyway, can we talk about future tripping because I think that's really gets people worked up and anxious because they're projecting into a future that hasn't necessarily happened yet. But can we speak to that a little bit? Because it's really hard for people to break that, at least in my experience.
Yes, let me tell you some places that my mind goes, and I think I wrote about this in the book, and this is actually a true story, but it is hilarious when I realized just how wild my brain can be. So you're just in the kitchen and you're washing dishes, right? You have no idea, you're just in that moment, but all of a sudden your mind starts to go to places. And let's say you're living with you're anxious about if you're a patient, you're anxious about some tests that are coming up. And you're not even aware of what's happening right now, by the way. You're just washing the dishes. And then all of a sudden, you're Deborah Winger in terms of endearment, and you're saying
Mm,
goodbye to your children that you don't even have,
mm,
right?
mm,
Your mind goes to those places. Or, my this literally happened when I started to think about dying before my husband. And what if, he's going to be so lonely and I love him so much and I want him to go out and I'm washing dishes. I want him to go out and date again, but not a younger woman. Oh, and now in my mind, Brian is dating a much younger woman and she's hot and all of the things. And now I'm jealous and now I'm pissed off. I'm still washing the damn dishes. And then later on, when he asks me where his glasses are, and if I've seen his glasses, I say, I don't know. Why don't you consult your child bride? Right. So my point is that I am not the only person with wild ferrets running through their brains.
Oh my
That's
goodness.
future tripping. That's us going down a death spiral of
Yeah.
fear and storytelling. And we can grab ourselves and in that moment even like laugh or share it with my new friend. Like, you'll never guess what happened, Laurie. I'm sitting here washing dishes and look at what I just did.
Oh my goodness. I'm dying. I'm laughing. Okay. And then just the wild ferrets. I think that's really what goes on. If you think of your thought streams as little wild ferrets that running around, bouncing off. You see those videos and they're bouncing off things and people and yeah, and then one gets really your attention. You start going in a deeper, darker, and then your poor people around you are, are going to
You have no
suffer the
idea what the hell's going
consequences
on.
until you return from your trip and come back to planet Earth in this moment. Oh my,
Exactly.
oh
And
my
then
goodness.
but you can say to yourself, like, okay, like, let's do some forensics on this.
Mm,
Has he
yes.
ever had a child bride that you know of? No. Okay. Like, this is such a great therapist line. Is this a fact or is this a feeling?
Mm,
Right. Has
right.
this ever happened? Have you ever been that out of control? Have you
Mm,
ever been at a play and decided to just run on the stage and stop the action? Right. Have you ever been in an audience where you actually thought, is there a chance that I might run on stage and like mess this whole thing up? I have. But the chances are that you're never going to do that. Have you ever done it in the past? No. Okay. So we start to like do some forensics on the reality of some of these thoughts actually materializing and blossoming into the hellscape that your mind
mm.
creates. More often than not, it's not going to happen.
What's fun about you, it sounds like you've really cultivated a very amazing skill set of turning these opportunities of observing these thought stories or streams or movies or whatever they play in your head and laughing at them because that's kind of what you need to do in order to not engage with them other than thank you for the entertainment. That was brilliant. Oh my goodness gracious. Yes, absolutely. And um let's get back to your book. It says I'm not a morning person. What an amazing title. And I did hear you speak in one of your videos about how the title came to you. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. Ti- coming up with the title for a book is a lot of pressure.
Sure.
And most of the titles that I came up with were awful, but for real, not just me telling myself they're awful, like literally my editor saying that's awful, keep going. Um, and it wasn't until like the 11th hour where they were like, dude, we have to have something to tell the buyers. And it's really when I went and I started, because I was so blocked, I went and I started to watch stand up, which is one of the things that I love to do as like a stress reliever or a way to recharge my own creativity. And for whatever reason, I was watching stand up and it came, right? It's a testament to sometimes when we're pushing so hard for the solution, it could be that we needed to go for a walk or we needed, to take the day off or we needed to just like be under the shower thinking about something else or gardening. And then it's like the creative spirit comes through, right? But not when we're choking it and forcing it. And I thought, hey, this is a really funny. I like this title. And I said to my editor, what do you think about this? And she said, it's either the dumbest thing I've ever heard or it's brilliant. I can't tell yet. And I was like, I'm onto something. That's exactly the kind of response I want. And so, but when I went a little deeper, it really made sense to me because I didn't think I was a morning person. It was the one emotion that I wanted to avoid. I mean, I can talk about being curious about your emotions and seeing them in its information, but when I started this journey 4 or 5 years ago of really doing this deep work, I had a blind spot for sure. It's the
Mm.
place I didn't want to go. And I think, like we talked about at the top of this beautiful interview, it's a place that many of us don't want to go. And yet our freedom lies in these places. So it all came together, and that's what the title ended up being.
Mm. Yeah, I think throughout your book, you really spell it out beautifully because you're touching in different ways how people can relate to you and your different stories and the humor. And I think the one that I think a lot of people can appreciate is people trying to give you, and I do love, thank you so much for helping people how to interact with someone who's had a very tragic loss, and you're a loss as a person, how to interact, but
Mhm.
and just be present with them. But the story about you crying over the inshore, um, I think spoke volumes to so many people who are literally just feeling like they're just hanging onto the edge of a cliff and afraid to let go because they're not sure what's going to happen when they literally land, if they ever do. Maybe it's the fear of never landing. Um, how do you take the story of your dad's death, and even begin to put word on paper? Like, how does that creative process evolve or even start? Like, do you just write for so many hours a day and these things just come out, and then, or like, how do you do that? It's such a fascinating thing to see on the other end.
Prayer, scotch. Let's see. You know, I am blessed because my publisher has really let me find the book.
Hmm.
Um, Usually my books start with an outline, and from there I know what I'm building. I know what I'm going to create. This one I was like flying the plane and building the plane at the same time, which is a little intimidating. But many versions of the outline, and then just starting to write and sort of feel like, okay, does this really fit in here? And then a lot of index cards. Like, so my editor and I would build the book with index cards. And then as we would just walk around my living room with all of these cards on the floor, chapter by chapter, and all the stories and, lessons under, within the chapter. And we would just stare at them like a forensics crime scene and say, like, does this fit here? Does that fit there?
Mm.
And then that's when the book starts to come together, and you can start to see what isn't going to make it in because it's just one book.
Mm.
And you find you could write about all these different things, but I think
Yeah.
the key is that this is a book for people to find comfort and solace and joy and possibilities in when life has kicked them in the teeth,
Mm.
when the rug has been pulled out from under you, when you think that you're never going to be the same, and you probably won't be. But
Mm.
you're like, now what do I do? How do I pick up the pieces of my life and move forward? And what I'm saying is, you can not only move forward, but you can thrive.
Mm.
And we just have to understand some of the basics. And so each chapter tackles a topic or an emotion that we're likely to experience when we get kicked in the teeth,
Mm.
from rage to grief to past traumas that come up. So you mentioned my therapist. She had a great saying. She said to me, when the grief train pulls into the station, it brings all the cars. It brings stuff that you think you're over. It brings other big, messy emotions. And you're not necessarily prepared for that. It's part of the reason why we don't think we're going to make it through. In grief literature, you often hear the metaphor of like the waves of grief that pass in and out and in and out. But when you're on the side of being the griever, it feels like a tidal wave, and it's going to drown you if you let it. And that's how I felt. And so I realized in that story that you mentioned in the CVS parking lot, when I finally let myself really break down and cry, that after that experience of letting that energy out, because that's really what it was, just trapped energy, I felt a little bit better. And then I thought, gosh, where are these other places in my life that I've been pushing this energy down or hustling it away with overwork or, any of the addictions that's so easy for many of us to turn to when we don't want to feel. Um, and that was my first flashlight, my breadcrumb that allowed me, first and foremost, Kris, to go on this journey. And then second, as the writer.
Mm. So it's like you had a flashlight in the fog and you were illuminating, it's getting brighter and brighter. Reminds me of a story. We lived in Florida for a period of time, and we went snorkeling in the Florida Keys in December, and it was my husband and my kids, and they're adults. And we there was pretty choppy waters, and I'm pretty calm, pretty good swimmer, but it was choppier. And as we got in, I had this overwhelming urge, like serious anxiety. And then the moment that I was like, Laurie, there's calm beneath the storm, right? So I put my head in, it was such a different world. And you come back up, and I'd come back up, and I'd see the waves, and I'd feel the stuff like, well, Laurie, you're okay, just go deeper. So I feel like that's kind of with grief, like you say, the waves, it's really choppy if you stay on the surface, but if you just let them
Mm.
and go deeper, that will really allow you to see the beauty that's can lie underneath that. And so I think that's the nice thing about
Love
what you're
that.
writing. Yeah, it really hit me, because I'm telling you, there were, with my own emotions, listening to you tell me about this in this book, I felt your rage, I felt your sadness and your joy and your peace. And so it was so fun to go on this journey with you in the book. And um I think another one that people are really frightened to deal with when it comes up, because they don't maybe understand, or maybe they see it in others and they respond to it, which just fuels it, is anger. And you're stepping outside the restaurant, and these drunk guys. Could you talk a little bit about that, and how do you I love these stories. So it's probably because I have many myself. So anyway, I can relate to you in that sense. But anyway, could you share a little bit about the anger piece? Because I think people are surprised that there's anger with grief, and they don't understand it.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's anger with life and we don't understand it,
Mm,
especially as women.
yeah.
The chapter is called Becoming Unbecoming.
Mm.
And I
That
remember,
cartoli, you started with that cartoli. I love
yeah.
that.
Well,
Yes.
my grandmother used to say, oh, my grandmother was Colombian, and she used to say, Christian, that is an unbecoming emotion. Like tears are unbecoming, anger is unbecoming, like suck it up, buttercup. And well intentioned and came from a different time. But the truth is that throughout space and time, I think we have said to ourselves, and our well meaning domesticators have taught us what's appropriate, what isn't appropriate. And so we put ourselves in these little boxes, especially as women. Our boxes as women are even smaller. And so as a result, you try to tell your anger, like, no, that's unbecoming, darling. Clean it up around the edges. If you're me, then it's not going to go well. And so, so the chapter is the exploration of this energy and this emotion, so that again we can get to understand it a little bit more. And the more research that I did, the more I familiarized myself with how anger works, and really started to explore how it's often referred to as a signaling emotion. And for me, anger says, ow, there's something wrong here. There's an injustice. There's something I need to stand up for. There's something, I've been wronged. This is wrong. What's happening? Red alert, danger. Anger is there to be like, yo, something's up. Something's going on here. I need you to pay attention. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have our anger, like our anger should just, run amok and shit all over the living room. Right. But my point is that it's not something for us to get so down on ourselves about. It's really there to protect us. And I went through this experience where I was again, pushing a lot of stuff down like many of us do. And I had a couple of moments in this chapter where I really kind of let it out. And one was an implosion and one was an explosion. And it was the explosion that you're referencing.
Yeah.
And basically, a bunch of drunk guys. I was out to dinner for my birthday with my parents, and I was trying to celebrate all of the milestone occasions, making every single one of them better than the next, and putting a lot of pressure on myself, to be honest. And I think sometimes anger can also be a pressure valve release. And so I was putting all this pressure on myself because what if this is my last birthday with him? And I was doing it more for him than I was even for myself. And we're at this restaurant, and we come out of the restaurant, we're getting our car, and these three drunk guys come up and basically pile into our car like it's an Uber. It's my parents' minivan, and they won't get out of the car. And one, starts to harass me and put his hands on me. And Laurie, didn't go well for him. Didn't go well. And I wrote about it. And I wrote about the rawness of it and what actually came out of my mouth as he, was harassing me, and the security came, and and I'm thinking to myself, this is the perfect moment for like a fan to come up and be like, what? How is that Kris Carr?
Probably would have stepped in front and helped you.
Maybe. Maybe.
Oh my goodness.
But the thing that I think was really powerful for me personally is one is I kept writing that chapter. That chapter took me the most work and time, and my editor kept saying, "No, not enough. Go further. Go deeper. Your reaction isn't strong enough. Like I know the story. You're not writing it the way it happened. Like so what? Keep going." And I was so intimidated. I was so nervous about sharing with the amount of vulnerability and transparency that I put into that chapter. But also, while I was living that experience the next day, what was startling for me was the amount of shame that I felt. Right. And as if it was all my fault. And as if like, I had messed up the night, and how could I not have control of my emotions? How could I have let this happen? Yeah, just waves and waves of shame. And then I thought, oh my goodness, this is the human experience, right? And then how do we come back and soothe ourselves so that we don't stay paralyzed in these very painful places? Part of the shame that I felt was having this belief or this thought like, here are these three jackasses to get to go through life. And after harassing me and my family, and this incredible human being is lucky if he'll have like another year left. Right. And so we write about that, and we try to experience it and try to understand it, and then try to hopefully people know that these are normal places to go and normal experiences and emotions to have. It doesn't make them easy, but it means you're human.
Yeah, I think that's the piece here to understand is that we're human, and we put either our own expectations or have external expectations. And I think the hardest are the ones that we put on ourselves because nobody else would have those expectations of us, I think, at least in my own experience. But as far as how people have reached out to you about the book, I'm sure there's been others who reached out to you and said, wow, this had such an impact. Is there any that resonate with you and that you'd like to share, like how that story is impacted? Because I really feel, because I had not even been going through mourning in this particular period that I'm listening to, but I mean, I can reflect them back on life, but I'm sure others that you're hitting them in a space and time that they needed you in this book. Has anyone reached out and shared a particular moving story with you?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people in my community, and it's lovely to be able to get DMs from people and even see reviews, which I oftentimes don't look at, but I have with this book because I want to see how it's resonating with people. And I think that, overall the experience has been you articulated what I was feeling,
Mm,
and or I was able to touch on these emotions and this material because of the stories that you shared and that you were willing to share them and be as transparent as you were. Um, I didn't know anybody else ever felt that way.
mm,
And it's making me feel like there's nothing wrong with me.
mm,
And so
mm,
I would say that those are the primary universal experiences that I think any of us can benefit from when we're more truthful. Because I often think about, you've probably read a lot about this, especially as a therapist. We're going through an epidemic of loneliness.
mhm,
And what is the thing that creates loneliness? Separation, isolation, feeling other, feeling like I don't fit in, And I think that I feel that way more when I'm not being truthful about who I am and what I feel, when I'm trying to put on a facade or spiff up, you know, like polish myself up so I'll fit into the world,
mm.
present myself a certain way so that,
Right,
I'll blend.
right.
And I feel so lonely when I do things like that
Mm,
because that's not me.
mhm,
And it's not any of us really, but when we are then brave enough to share the truth of who we actually are, what we are feeling, what we are experiencing, whether it's something that's difficult or something that's really great. The other side could be that we're afraid to share good things that are happening in our life because we don't want other people to feel bad,
mm.
right? So
Yeah.
we dim our light and
Mm,
we create more and more separation and isolation as a result of that.
mm,
True connection and a sense of belonging, I think, comes from me showing up and saying, Laurie, this is who I am. I would love to know who you are. Let's be ourselves together and have a gas.
I'm sure there would be plenty. Um, it's funny that you speak that because I think as a physician, there's such a
Yeah.
very strict and rigid way. You go through medical school, you go through residency. It's like you have the answers, your prescription pad, this is what you do. And um, I think where I really struggled with that was relating to my patients. So the more that I shared stories and my own, be it or other patients, of course, with keeping anonymity very high, keeping sure that my patient's identity was well, but the story element of it anyway, that's really where I found the most powerful connection with others and building this rapport and trust and community. Can you speak to the community piece? Because I know you have your community, if you could speak to that and or maybe what prompted you to even build that. But community is such an important piece, those relationships, because we do isolate ourselves. How does someone begin to open themselves to being vulnerable in creating really timeless relationships where you feel heard and listened and it's trusting and loving? How do you start that process, or in your own experience or in your own uh, community? Maybe others have spoken to that.
Yeah, let me go back and say that you are a physician and I mentioned that you're a therapist and I know you're a physician,
No, it's all
but I
good.
think that you listen to your patients in a way that I'm just saying you're both.
Okay, thank you. Oh no, I sometimes think I should have gone into psychotherapy or something. For
Oh,
sure. Oh my goodness. Thank you.
well,
That's a compliment.
I think it's the core of actually of really actually having those valuable relationships. And
Mhm.
it's interesting because I remember when I was looking for my doctor and the first doctor that I spoke to suggested a triple organ transplant. And I didn't know anything about medicine, but I was like, this doesn't sound like a good idea. Um, I don't know, man. And then the next one gave me 10 years to live, and I have a very rare disease. And sometimes it can be aggressive, sometimes it can be slow, sometimes it can change. And so I'm just on a watch and wait, let cancer make the first move plan, which I have been for 21 years now. And what I found to be so powerful about saying, I am going to be the CEO of my health. You know, I'm going to build a team, hire, fire. I'm going to look for my second in command, but ultimately I'm in charge. With respect and saying, oh yeah, you've been to school. I haven't. Right. But I'm the person that has to live in this life and in this body. And so I have to be the one who says, this feels good, this doesn't.
Right.
Finding my doctor eventually, the biggest reason why I said yes to something which seems so outrageous to me. You just want to do nothing? Like, what the heck are you talking about? But finding him and saying yes to that non-treatment plan, it was because of the relationship that I felt immediately. It was because of his bedside manner. It was because he listened and was willing to hear what was on my heart and what I was struggling with, or even some of the things that I was researching, which of course inside he was probably like, that is nuts. Where did you pick that? What pamphlet at what health food store did you pick up that nonsense idea?
Oh, goodness.
You know what I mean? But he never made me feel like it was a nonsense idea.
Right, right.
And so we developed a relationship.
Mm.
You know, and then we're like going to a Bruce Springsteen concert, dancing and stepping in on each other's toes. Right. So we've known each other a very long time now. And I think that to answer your question about community, it is about finding those people that are willing to listen and are willing to build true relation together. We can't do this thing called life or wellness alone. I think that we're pack animals. We need each other. And even when we're going through really difficult times, we still have an opportunity to connect. But I think I'll just say one more thing about that is when we're going through difficult times, it's easy to isolate because you don't want to be a burden, or maybe you don't want to say the wrong thing. You don't want to ask for too much, or maybe your person is going through a difficult time and you're afraid to get it wrong. So you don't do anything. Right. And what I'm suggesting is certainly in parts of the book is we don't have to have the answers, and it's not our job to fix things. It's really not our job to fix things. It's our job to show up to the best of our ability. And I think that takes the pressure off of saying, like, I actually don't know what to say. I'm going to tell you that, but I know how to listen and to be here with you. And I have to say that's the most beautiful medicine that I have found, is actually being with somebody who's willing to see and sit and hear and listen, whether it's a doctor or somebody who's really close to me in my inner circle.
Yeah, allowing space for that person just to be and share if they choose to. I think that's a very powerful thing to do. When it's obviously strikes me that you are a very good listener and because you've had to give yourself space, and you just probably have, I'm assuming, carried these skill set in with your relationships. When people are listening, for example, I know in the beginning, like for example, when I came out of residency and you're your first day of attending, you're like, holy, there's no one to back me up. You know, you have your comrades and your colleagues, and my daughter's entering her last 6 months of family medicine residency, and she's like, Mom, I'm really scared. It's like, I got your back, kid. I'll be there if you have someone, but you're going to be fine. You're way smarter than I ever was. And, I think there was always this process that I noticed early on, is that when patients would be describing a situation or a problem, like going through, okay, what's my answer? What's going to be, like these thoughts, just like, and then the terror of like, am I going to prescribe the wrong medicine or not? Or am I going to miss something? Like, and So I think that comes along with maybe a little less stressful in that sense with friendships or your partners, and and certainly those closest to you, is that you're always thinking like, what is the next thing I'm going to say? How do you quiet your mind to give space for listening? Because I think it would be a natural human response is to react for whatever reason, trying to fix something, trying to alleviate stress, trying to, give them calm. You want to take it on yourself. How do you provide that space in your own mind? Because it, that can be challenging in and of itself.
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I used to have that experience too. So I have given a lot of talks over the years, and I've been doing this for 20 years now. And so there have been plenty of Q&As where there's thousands of people in the audience, and then that question comes up, and I'm like either racing ahead, coming up with whatever my answer is going to be, to wow the person, but also wow the 2,000 people that are sitting there in the audience so that they actually don't think I'm a fraud, right? And so there's that moment.
Oh,
Then
goodness.
there's also the moment where the question gets answered and you're like, I have no fucking idea what I'm going to say, how to help this person. You know what I mean? But there's a
Yes,
lot
I
of
do.
people hanging on pins and needles. What the heck is this girl going to say? Right. And so
Oh.
I think ultimately what
Oh
I
my
have
goodness.
tried to do and come to use as a muscle is to just get out of the way and to
Mm,
actually, if I can give my full presence and listen to what's being said, but also what's not being said,
mm,
and even say, what do you think?
mm,
In those moments where I think I have to fix something for someone, they spent $20 on a ticket. They have to get this thing
mm,
fixed. You know what I mean? Like,
mm,
and I can say, well, what does your intuition say? Let's work.
mm,
Let's start there.
mm,
Or I can get out of the way enough to just speak through my heart, because usually my heart has way better answers than this noggin.
mm,
Um, but I can't activate any of that wisdom if I'm chattering away like a parrot on the inside. Like, do this, do that. I was just kind of sitting there and being with the person.
mm. Activate the parrot. Oh, that's fun. So yeah, I like that. Activate your wisdom. Because I think we all have that internal wisdom if we just allow it. People are so much more powerful than they understand that they are. Um, that's really beautiful. I think there's also strength in, like you mentioned, the space, because that allows you time to see what evolves in that moment for that person. Um, yeah, I think that's fantastic. So, in like I said, I want to be very thoughtful of your time. So this has been amazing. Um, is there final lessons that one either you learned through the process of writing this book, or that you would hope someone would see that you either changed or evolved as a person yourself? Like, how was this process? Because I would think this would be, you speak cathartic in here often, like the crying and the thing. How did the writing of this type of book bring change into you? Like, how did Kris Carr change from where she was when she started to the Kris Carr on the other end?
Mm, still evolving.
Yeah.
There's a quote that I'll paraphrase, and it's by Carl Jung. And
Mm,
he talks about how we orbit through the same themes throughout our life. And with each passing orbit, we find a new layer of meaning. And for me, it's that orbit that is the mechanism of our healing, of our growth, of our expansion. And so
mm,
when we're tough on ourselves and say, oh, here I am again, haven't I learned this already? Haven't I, uh, you know, figured this piece out? It's like, oh, this is me orbiting. And each time I orbit, it's going to be a little easier. I'm going to grow a little more. I'm going to learn more about myself first and foremost. And hopefully, I'll come at it from this perspective of tending to myself, heart tending, as opposed to criticizing. Because we're going to have the rug pulled out from under us, and it's not going to be roses all the time. And we as humans, I think oftentimes we want the rainbow, but we say, hold the rain. And it's not how it works. And so if we can become a little more resilient and understand that there's nothing flawed, this is orbit, then I think we get through this life a little easier, because we're not going to get through it like scratch free and staying resistant. It's just not how it's designed.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about. Like those little quotes, like they're just so perfectly like formed and so appropriate and just catch you off guard and bring you back to like, yes, that's exactly right. Oh my goodness.
Thank
Ay, ay,
you.
ay. That's
Thank
fabulous.
you.
Um, man, there was Porsha Nelson. Are you familiar with the autobiography in 5 chapters? Have you heard that? There's a hole
Yes.
in the book. So that kind of reminds you of that orbit that you speak of, right? She speaks of she's basically walking down the sidewalk and she falls into a hole and she's surprised. It caught her off guard and she climbs out finally and she walks down the next side. There's a hole and she falls in again. She was like, I've been here before. And eventually, as she continues to fall through the hole, then she circumvents the hole. And then suddenly she says, I'm going down another street. So I think it's kind of that similar situation until we allow ourselves to learn and oh, okay, now I get it. There's a hole and I can choose to either fall in the hole, knowing what's on the other end, or I can choose to just go down another sidewalk. And so I think that's really a powerful that's one of my favorite poems. There's another one about children. They start as puppies, and that they're lovable and they just want to be around you, and then they turn into cats. And you're like, I thought I was raising a puppy, but now what am I doing? And it's still sharing you and inks, and then they turn back to puppies. And it's kind of that, just it's really fun to see how people put in words their journey, which I think is so powerful what you've done here. And yeah, and I just want to thank you so much for sharing your stories with us, because I think there's so much more ripples of healing that you have no idea that you're going to be instilling, because I've been recommending this book to others and I'm sure they will be
Oh,
others too. So thank you for all your work that you've done with that.
thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. It's a joy. I always feel like the creative process, and this is for each and every one of us, because I think sometimes we think, oh, I'm not creative. I couldn't write a book, or I couldn't do whatever it is that you think is creative. But to survive is an act of creativity.
Mm.
And it is also, I think, this place where we can get such solace and such recharge, whatever that looks like for you. When you and I were talking before we started to record, you were asking me, like, what's one thing that, has come up for you a lot, maybe even in interviews, and I want to leave you with it, which is, it was some really beautiful wisdom that my dad gave me. And as his life was drawing to an end, those wisdom bombs were dropping more and more, trying to like squeeze it all in. Let me get some more dad wisdom in. And one of the things that he said was, sometimes the golden years are for shit. And I was like, this is really inspiring. Please say more, you know?
Mm.
And he said, honestly, it's because we put them off. We think, when I retire, when the kids get out of the house, when
Mm.
I do this, that, and the other thing, when the renovation's done, whatever it is that your big project is, du
Mm.
jour, then I'll be able to go to the girls' weekend, or, for him, it's golf more with my brother. And, then I'll be able to do those things. But I got to get all this shit done first. And
Mm.
then he's diagnosed with terminal cancer. And his time that he thought was going to be in at least another decade plus of enjoying himself meant it was like a year, 2 years of a lot of pain.
Mm.
Um, and he said, you got to make your golden years now, love. You have to find those golden moments throughout each and every day. They don't have to be these big, you know, it doesn't have to be like a Cecil D be what? Big production, theatrical production, but like, can you find these little moments each and every day? And that's been the greatest
Mm.
lesson for me. I mean, it's one of the things that I take from the experience of really spending a lot of time with him. Um, and I use it as my own compass now of how can I make more golden moments throughout the course of my life and not try to save them all up for some mythical time when my ducks are in a row, because if they're my ducks, they don't want to be in a row. Okay.
Yes, yes. I have tried to herd ducks and cats, feral cats, more than a few times in my life, and it's a futile process. So I totally appreciate that. I think that's a beautiful way to end our conversation. It's been so delightful and honestly more than I could have hoped for. I was really nervous and anxious and excited to meet you, but it's been absolutely lovely. So thank you again from the bottom of my heart for spending so much time with me and sharing your incredible story with us in the audience. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much.